The turntable has become an instrument for the creation of new and exotic sounds not yet heard by the human ear, and in the hands of a capable turntablist, concerned with hearing.
How y'all doing out there? This is DJ Spider-Man here to introduce our video, A Beginner's Guide to Scratching and Mixing. The DJs that you'll see on this tutorial definitely come from many different sides of the DJ realm. DJ E, for instance, currently runs 2 record labels, a record store, and a mobile disc jockey sound lighting and rental business. But it's his mixing skills on the 1 and 2s that have made him one of the most sought-after club jocks in Los Angeles. Also from Los Angeles, we've got Jay Solo, who brought his mixing skills on the radio all the way from Jammin' Z90 in San Diego to 100.3 The Beat in Los Angeles as well. Add to that, the 1999 DMC USA champion, Petrix. He's going to show you a thing or two that you can incorporate into your own set. We'll top it all off with interviews by the legendary Mixmaster Mike, innovative DJ pioneer DJ Focus, and DJ E. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and learn. Now before we get started, let me show you how to hook up your cartridges, your DJ mixer, and set your turntables to the optimum level settings for scratching. If your 1200 or 1210 is equipped with a voltage selector, you'll first want to set it to 110, the American standard voltage. Next, we'll hook up the cartridge to the head shell, in this case a Stanton 500 AL, making sure all of the color terminals on the head shell match the colors on the cartridge. You'll also notice that on the top of the cartridge where the screws go in, that they're slotted. This is to allow the cartridge to be set to your own personal tastes. You can move it forward or towards the back of the head shell, but most turntablists find it works best to align the cartridge flush with the tip of the head shell. We'll then tighten the cartridge down. Now if you want more groove traction, you can also use a Concord style cartridge, which some DJs prefer. It's kind of nice that they're all one piece, but I think that 500 ALs and similar cartridges are the best to train on, because if you can learn to scratch on these, you can scratch using any cartridges. Next, we'll mount the head shell and cartridge assembly onto the tone arm by twisting this ring counterclockwise until it's snug but not over tightened. We'll then apply the tone arm weight to the tone arm, turning it counterclockwise. First, we'll balance the tone arm to what's called a 0 point. What we're looking for here is to have the tone arm perfectly and levelly suspended without touching anything. Once we've accomplished this, we'll go ahead and add more weight to the tone arm so that it drops on the record smoothly. I always like to use the lever to check this initially. It should drop down something like this. Now most scratch DJs set the tone arm weight by aligning it with this little ridge to about 3 to 3.5 grams. Next, we'll unlock what's called the gimbal suspension on the 1200. Once it's unlocked, you'll see the entire arm assembly can be moved up or down accordingly, and most scratch DJs will also set the arm height to 0, which is lined up with this little gauge you see here. Once having that set, we'll go ahead and lock the tone arm height back down with the lock mechanism. The tone arm will now stay perfectly down. Last in the optimum scratch settings is to set the anti-skate to the max, which is 3. The anti-skate function keeps your tone arm from moving back and forth erratically while riding the groove. Next, we'll hook up our turntable to our mixer. The first of these connections are the ground wires, which will eliminate any buzzing and humming sounds coming from an AC source through the turntables. Every DJ mixer has these ground terminals. Next, we'll hook up the turntables to the phono input, and don't use the line inputs for turntables because they don't have the special phono preamps that are built into a phono input. Therefore, they won't be heard through a line input even if they're connected. We'll then hook the master outs to our audio system, making sure all the way to make sure the right inputs are always red and the left are always white. This is called being in phase, and you'll know if you're not in phase if your sound system sounds kind of flangey. The last is to hook up the mixer's AC adapter, plug it into an AC outlet, and that's it.
Yo, what's up? This is DJ E representing Funk Deluxe and Dynamic Tracks Records. And now that Spider-Man has shown you how to properly set up your DJ system, your needles, your turntables, and your mixer, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the fundamental basics of scratching and mixing. Before we can talk about any particular scratch, we must first understand what is scratching. Scratching basically is a combination of moving the record that has a particular sound queued up on it with a crossfader, which is right here, to bring the signal in and out and cut it up to make a rhythm out of it. You can see that I have a record here that's queued up to a certain sound, and with the crossfader all the way to the right, you hear no sound whatsoever coming out. When I move the crossfader in the middle, the sound comes in. When I move it back out, the sound cuts off. So once again, the combination of moving the record in time with moving the crossfader in and out creates a rhythm, which is then termed as a scratch. There's lots of variations of scratches. Let's start out talking about a very basic one that I learned years ago when I first started DJing. At that time, we called it a monkey skip. A lot of other people referred to it as a chirp, and there's many other names for scratches out there. But we're not going to focus too much on terminology of what the names of these scratches are, more so on the technique of how to actually perform these. So once again, we have a record here on the left side, and it's queued up to a sound, one that's pretty familiar. A lot of DJs use this to scratch with. You hear it right there. And I'll show you how I can create a scratching rhythm using that sound and the crossfader. There's also other variations of this scratch. Once you've mastered the rhythm of being able to do this, you can throw in variation patterns like this. There's also what's called a churn. All right, now that we've got that basic technique down, I want to talk to you a little bit about the next scratch, which is now called the crab. The crab is basically a combination using 3 fingers on the crossfader, and I perform this scratch from the fader start position being open. You move the fader in with your thumb and then 3 times, real quick, click and use the index finger to push the crossfader back into the open position. And so what you get as a result of this is 3 very rapid successions from the sound that's on the record. Let me demonstrate. There's another variation of the scratch, which is actually a derivative of the crab, came a little bit before the crab, and also commonly referred to as a 2-click flare. Once again, this particular scratch, you want to start out with the crossfader being in the open position, but as opposed to the crab where we use 3 fingers, we only use 2, and that's our middle finger and the index finger along with the thumb. The way the scratch works is, once again, we use the thumb to click the crossfader in, then we do one quick little flip like that, and then once again use our index finger to push the crossfader back into the open position. Done quickly, it looks like this. Let me illustrate now what it sounds like with a sound. One other variation of that 2-click flare, and this is actually a scratch that I fell into by accident when I was first learning how to do the flare. It's commonly referred to as the twiddle. It's a combination of using, once again, the middle finger and the index finger along with the thumb on the crossfader, but flicking the crossfader very quickly like this against the side. Let me show you what this sounds like. Right, the next scratch we're going to talk about is what's called a transform, also known as a rhythm scratch. This particular scratch can be done using either the crossfader or the phono line switch. Now, we haven't talked about the phono line switch yet, but let me tell you a little bit about it now. The phono line switch acts pretty much in the same vein that the crossfader does by bringing the sound in or out. You see, when I click the switch to the line, I get absolutely no sound from my record. When I bring it back into the phono mode, I get my sound coming back. So basically, pretty much like we described using the crossfader in the beginning, you can use the phono to line switch to do the exact same thing. This could be useful when you're performing fast and furious scratches, such as the monkey skip that we've already talked about, or this particular scratch called the transform. Let me this time illustrate a little bit about how this is done. All right, so now that we've covered the basic overviews of the mixing technique, let's go ahead and demonstrate how this is done and put some of this theory into actual action. I'm going to start out with the record here on the left-hand side. Picked a nice little house tune here. I'm going to start it off somewhere near the beginning here. Let this thing play. Pick up our headphones, and what we're going to do now is what's called cueing. Cueing is the act of listening to the record we're getting ready to play and matching up the speeds and the beats of this one with that. Put the record on here. And before we start, remember what I said in the beginning about EQ. I'm going to take the bass on this equalizer, I'm going to cut it all the way down. Once again, to achieve that smoothness, so that when I come in this mix, I'm not abrupt and the mix doesn't sound all off and crazy. So this record is considerably slower than this one. I'm going to need to speed it up using my pitch control to match the beats of that one. And what I'm doing now is effectively I'm splitting up my hearing. My left ear is listening to this, while my right ear is listening to the speaker over here on what's being played on the left side. This is the hardest part about mixing, and that one that takes the most practice and time to learn. However, once you get it, you can mix like a pro. All right, so I think I pretty much matched the speeds up here. I'm going to back the record out to the beginning here. Find my cue point. My cue point is where I'm going to come into the mix. Usually that's the very first kick drum of the very first measure of the record, also known as the downbeat. See me here bobbing my head, kind of moving my body a little bit. That helps a lot because your body can help you find that groove, find that mix, let you ride it out. Here we got a break coming up. I'm going to wait for the end of this break, and coming right out of this break, we're going to start our mix. Here we go, we're getting ready to finish out here this break. Make sure everything's nice and matched up here on our levels. And here we go. Now we're in the mix. Both records are playing at the same time. It's audible on the speaker system. You're seeing me make fine-tune adjustments here using my hands to speed this up a little bit by twisting the nipple on the turntable. If it starts to drift a little bit too fast, I can always slow it down by gently rubbing my fingers here against the platter. Meanwhile, I'm constantly making adjustments to my pitch control to get closer to what we call locking in the groove, basically letting both records ride for an infinite amount of time, staying on beat. I'm going to move the crossfader into the middle here, which basically means that we have full volume on both sides. And now I'm going to get ready to make the transition over to our new record. I'm going to do this by lowering the bass of this one and bringing up the bass on the right side. Meanwhile, you see my ear still on the headphones, keeping track of what's really going on, making sure I'm still on beat. I'm going to switch my headphones now to the left side so that I can keep track of what's going on. Most importantly of all, making sure I'm still on beat. We've got both breaks going at the same time. The bass is cut all the way down here on the right. And I'm getting ready to go all the way over to the right side turntable. Here we go. And I'm done in the mix. See, like I was saying before, practice makes perfect. If you practice these techniques, apply the principles of EQs, levels, the smooth crossfade control, and splitting up your hearing, keeping your earphones on so you can make sure you're still on beat. Even after the initial mix is started, you can mix all night long just like the pros.
I'm Jay Solo. I represent KKBT FM out here in Los Angeles. Legend Entertainment, also doing a lot of clubs out here in Los Angeles. Just basically trying to do my thing. About now I'm just going to go over a few scratches with you guys. This is the baby scratch. By moving your fader into the middle so you can hear the sound, you just want to get the feel of the record. Really. The next scratch I'm going to show you is the military scratch by moving the fader back to the middle to make the sound and cutting it back off by moving it to the right. Next scratch I'm going to show you are scribbles or stutters. And by using the crossfader again, moving that to the middle. Now the next scratch I'm going to use the up and down faders. It's basically the same as using the crossfader, but for me it's more easier if I did it with the up and down fader. I have more control over it. The next scratch I'm going to show you are chirps, and it goes a little something like this. The next scratch I'm going to show you is called the flare scratch. It's one of the more recent scratches and it's one of the most popular scratches around. The next scratch is the orbit or the two-click flare. It's basically two clicks of a flare up, 2 clicks back.
You can practice combinations of your favorite scratches to create your own style, like you see Jay Solo doing here, rocking it freestyle.
This is P-Trix, represent IF2 Immortal Fader Fighters, the 1999 DMC USA champion. And we're just gonna do little like basic scratches to complex scratches that's going on today. Just gonna show you how to do it. Okay, like the first scratch that was pretty much invented was just pretty much moving the record back and forth with which we call the baby scratch, which is just the next step was a military scratch where you cut out the sound to make a rhythm. Like the next scratch pretty much is like the jab scratch. Okay, the jab scratch is just the forward motion of the record. So you just take the sample and you cut off the reverse sound. So it's just the forward motion of the sound that you have. So you cut out no reverse sounds. Once again, I'll show it again. And everything I'm doing is reverse. So if you're gonna do it the normal, this is what you call hamster. If you want to do it the regular way, would be. This next scratch pretty much was like originated from, everyone says like in Philadelphia, they're popular for doing this, is the transform scratch, which is pretty much where you just cut off the sound. You just keep cutting out the sound while you move the record back and forth. So it's like a a scratch that was really popular back then was a chirp scratch. I guess they named it like because it sounds like the sound of a bird chirping. You get the very beginning of the forward motion, and you cut out the middle, and you get the very end of the reverse motion. It's hard to get at first, but then this is what it sounds like once you got it. Okay, this next scratch I'm gonna do is pretty much, you don't need to really use the faders or cut out the sound. It's pretty much a record movement scratch. It's called the tear scratch, where you just pause in between. So you kind of stutter when you move. It's like. Okay, this next scratch is pretty much more like an effect scratch. It's called the fade. You're just using like the volume. Pretty much you're just like doing fades. Like bringing the volume up and down. This can be used with a bunch of different scratches. That's like I could do fade jabs, fade transform, fade tears. The real popular scratch now is called the flare scratch, invented by DJ Flair from the Scratch Pickles. And it's pretty much, it's like a transform, but exactly opposite. Like for a transform, you start with the fader close and you cut off the sound. But a flare scratch is, you start with the fader open and like the exact opposite movement of a transform. So it's hard to explain, but it's weird. Here's how it sounds, like real slow. It's like a one click forward and one click back, like with the fader. And then once you get it real fast, it sounds. This next scratch is like a variation of the flare. It's called the orbit. It's pretty much a 2-click flare, which is like exactly the same thing as a flare, except 2 clicks forward and 2 back. So it'll sound like this. And the orbit is like the 2-click flare, like at twice the speed. This next scratch is called the crab. It was invented by, I believe, Qbert and DJ Disc from the Scratch Pickles. It's pretty much like an illusion scratch where you just cut off all the sound using all your fingers on your hand. What you'd want to do is put pressure with your thumb, like towards sound, where sound would come in, and you want your fingers just to come and like hit the fader. So it's like actually transforming really fast, like 4 in 1.
P-Trix is a good example of how far you can get with some hardcore practice and determination. Here's P-Trix rocking a showcase with tons of scratch licks and beat juggling.
I'm just plain terror. I'm just plain terror. Plain terror. Bust it. Bust it. Bust it. Bust it. Bust it.
And now let's get some quick tips with a DJ that's toured the world, DJ Swamp.
Probably one of the best records for beginners is my skip-proof scratch tool, a record I put out a few years ago to make it real easy to learn. You can use pretty much any needle, any turntable even. It doesn't have to be an expensive one. You can use a cheap one because no matter how much the needle skips, you're still on the same sound. So you can really go crazy with it. Another good record for practicing that's great for beginners is the Never Ending Breakbeats record that I put together, where most of the time a record works its way in towards the center, but this is a series of lock grooves where I timed the beat out so that the beats would just keep playing. And it just keeps spinning there. So you can just practice for hours and just scratch to it, and the beat will just keep playing. And there's over 200 beats on it to pick from, so if you get bored of practicing with one, you can just go to the other. And what's great for mixing is that once you find the tempo of the record that you're mixing it with, you can jump through each beat and they're all timed out perfectly. So you can just keep jumping through beats that you're mixing with your song. Cool scratch you can work on after you get past the basics. So I'm kind of jumping around through syllables of words, like this one.
Check this out. 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 Check this out.
You can simulate an echo by using the volume fader. And you can do them in reverse. This is done basically just by turning off the volume, and then when you put it back on, you put it at a lower level, like 8, and then another lower level, 6, 4, just gradually move down. Tones can be a lot of fun to scratch because you can come up with your own original melodies with the speed of the turntable. So you can combine transforming with the crossfader and moving the speed.
to get into the study of different types of music instead of just like trying to like gain knowledge or inspiration off of just like hip hop and just scratching within itself. Just get into like listening to jazz, blues, rock, you know. It'll broaden your horizons to like open up to new avenues of trying to develop scratch art.
I would say learn to think for yourself. The videos, it's abundant, you know, all the battle videos, so you can pick it up and watch them, and you'll naturally get influenced by that, because we learn by example and comparison, you know. So you pick up a video, that's the example, the comparison is yourself, you know. So you learn off of that, but if you don't know how to think for yourself, then you're just gonna be a little clone or something, you know. And with time, as you evolve and mature, you know, you can break away from that. But if you're aware of it when you're just starting off, then you'll progress at a faster rate.
Practice, practice, and more practice. Now, I remember when I was first DJing, I was so dedicated and committed to learning the art of DJing. I used to spend anywhere from 6 to 8 to as much as 12 hours a day, every single day in my bedroom, and then later on in my studio, just practicing my skills and honing my technique. Now, I'm not talking about practicing any one particular skill, like scratching, for example, which actually leads me to the second part of the answer. That part being that it's important to be well-rounded in your DJing. You know, what am I talking about? Covering all the aspects that we talked about in this video, for example. Everything from scratching to beat juggling to beat mixing, and even knowing how to use your equipment, how to set up your equipment, perhaps maybe even service your equipment. You know, knowing how to set up your needles, how to balance your tone arms, how do your mixers work, how your sound systems work, knowing the difference between a single amplifier and a double amplifier system, knowing how to use a crossover, an equalizer, or even a big mixing console. All those things come into play when you want to become a DJ. The third part of the answer would be particularly aimed at DJs that are into playing for nightclubs or parties, events, any kind of undergrounds or raves if you're into the dance music. The most important part to remember when doing that sort of a DJing is that you're there to entertain the crowd. What that means is that people's taste, their likes and dislikes must be placed first and above your own. You got to remember that you're there to entertain them. And in fact, you're probably going to be even getting paid to entertain them, which makes it double important. If that means you got to put your own personal tastes and preferences aside for that particular moment so that the people that paid to come in and see you and have a good time and listening to what you're doing, then so be it. And if you can learn how to enjoy that part of the DJing aspect, instead of only focusing on the stuff that you want to do and showing off your technical skills on the turntables, then in my estimation and my experience, you've reached the ultimate epitome of being a well-rounded professional DJ.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for joining us on our tour of the fundamentals of scratching and mixing. I hope all you beginners out there get some great information today that'll definitely help take your skills to the next level. And remember, like anything else you want to do well, it just takes practice. But you know you could do it. So until next time, this is Richard Spider Bonin saying practice and conquer. Peace.